order. So good afternoon. This is the meeting, a special meeting of the Board of Directors to review the proposed draft budget for 2022, 2023. So with that, we have a roll call, please.
Directors English,
Present.
Cardonish,
Here.
Giardini,
Here.
Logan,
Here.
and Peterson.
Present.
Okay, and seeing that we have no members of the public on the Zoom call or in the room, we'll go ahead and start our order of business, which is the budget workshop. So I'm going to turn it over to our general manager to walk us through the budget. All of you should have received the email this afternoon, and I think here this afternoon when you arrive, there's additional copies of the budget highlight and some other documents. So with that, I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for being here this afternoon. Just a couple of things. As you mentioned, the budget, the draft budget that we're reviewing today is posted online. Today, we issued 2 replacement pages. They were very minor changes. The pages were page 9 and 37, I believe. Those can just replace the version that was provided to you previously. Those changes relate to just one recommended revision to the wastewater fund, and we'll go there. We'll get to that a little bit later on, and we can go over that. So that's why both pages have changed. I also sent out via email, and these are all posted online as well, this budget highlights, this kind of little outline that we're going to go through that in a little bit. And I also provided a copy, because I had a question yesterday about the fire fund financial model. And so I emailed that out. It's posted online, and you have a copy of it now. When you for the fire fund, you may want to, if that's something that's helpful for you, compare line items to what the model had predicted to you. Also, we do have sandwiches and salad. We can approach this however you like. We can take a break in an hour or at 5:30 or something, and you can grab something, or you can just get up as you wish. It's kind of up to the president here about how you want to do that. But this is intended to be kind of a work session, just kind of trying to take full advantage of your time. Our goal is to be done with this prior to 7 or maybe prior to 6:45, so we can break this down a little bit before your 7 o'clock meeting. However, if for any reason the board doesn't make it all the way through the budget between now and 7, we can suspend this meeting before you go to the regular meeting, and then reconvene it at the end of the meeting. So don't feel like you have to be rushed, but we should have more than enough time. Okay, so with that, I'll start by saying I'm going to just follow along these highlights rather than going line by line through everything in the budget. But if there's something that you have a question about, or something you want to discuss further that's not included in one of these, just one of its highlights, we absolutely can't talk about it. I just grabbed the things that I thought were most important. Just as a reminder, this is an incomplete draft. The transmittal letter, the wage schedule, and the departmental summaries, the text items are not included here, but all the numerical items are, the line items and the summary of the balance, all of those items are here. Again, if there's consensus by the board to revise the draft, those revisions will be incorporated into the proposed budget that is subject of the June 21st public hearing. We've already noticed that hearing, so we'll have one on June 21st, after which you can consider adopting the budget. Any replacement pages that are provided that change as a result of today's discussion, or you're actually gonna have a couple items tonight that might create some changes, we'll issue new pages that can just be inserted into this document. So kind of overall, and I'll just start with maybe suggesting you flip to page 9 and use the new page 9 that was passed out today. The summary of fund balance for fiscal year, this is for the year under study, or next fiscal year, 22-23, starting July 1st. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight on this page. One, just to note that the asset replacement and cash reserves from the strategic financial policies are fully incorporated in all funds. You can see the expected beginning balances for the year, the contributions to asset replacement, and as well as how OPEB works, and that's a little different, are here, as well as the cash reserve. The one significant change is probably easiest to see it on this page is that historically we've paid for retiree health insurance as a part of the health insurance line item within the budget unit that the person whose costs are attributed had retired from. So if they were a firefighter that retired, their costs remained with the fire fund, and they've been programmed and paid annually out of the fire fund. With this budget, we've moved all of those expenses. We're proposing to move all the expenses to the administration fund. And then when we get to admin, you can see those costs. And then you can also see in the admin fund, and again on this page, that we're proposing to withdraw from the OPEB trust a like amount to what we spend during the course of the year for this retiree medical care. We've set up that trust. It's to reimburse us for expenses, so it's no longer the pay-as-you-go concept necessarily, although we're still paying for it annually. The reason I said to look at it on this page is because you can also see that we've proposed to transfer out the OPEB accounts from each of the other individual funds. So for example, on Fund 1, you see water OPEB, it's the 5th line item down, and you'll see a transfer out of $1 million or $1,020,000. That ends up being a transfer into admin fund. We've proposed as a part of this budget to merge all of those OPEB set asides, which are already in trust, into one fund to simplify the accounting going forward.
Yeah, just what I was going to ask the president, how you wanted this to work. Do you want us to ask questions as the general manager goes? Do you want us to wait until we have?
I think let's make it interactive. So I think it'd be better to ask questions as we go.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you to just explain that a little bit more. What's the rationale for transferring that into, other than simpler accounting? Why transfer that out? And then 2 is just to explain on the, I see our overall position from the end of, projected end of the year to the estimated for next year. We have a pretty substantial loss in overall, and that is primarily because of that payout to OPEB.
No, when you say there's a, let me answer the first question first, and then we'll circle back around. Really it's twofold. We're proposing to combine the OPEB accounts for 2 reasons. One is our actuarial analysis and our balances are not provided to us in a broken down fashion. So we actually have to kind of unwind that to be able to program it by fund in our financial statements to begin with. It's an imperfect and somewhat messy arrangement, but that's the way we've dealt with it in the past. As it became clear that the actuarial thought we were quote unquote fully funded, and that's also an imperfect statement, because we may not be in the long run, but as we became fully funded, we evaluated our options. Do we want to keep breaking these costs apart each year, even though the funds are, practically speaking, commingled in one fund? Or since all the funds are fully funded and they've all paid in their share, if we combine it into the admin fund, and 5 or 10 years from now there's a shortfall, or we decide we need to contribute more, there's already a way of breaking down those costs through the cost allocation plan. So let's say in 2025, district-wide, we want to contribute another $100,000 to the OPEB fund because there's a recognized need to do that. We have a cost allocation plan that will help us allocate those costs. So if we program that expense in the admin fund, it would trickle back to the other funds anyways. So we think this will actually make it much more straightforward in explaining our liability. All the liability now rests with the admin fund, but the admin fund can't exist without the other funds anyways.
So then periodically, will you true up between the actuarial and what you
Annual, yeah, annual. We'll do an annual. Actually, it's always kind of lagging, but yes, that'll be part of our financial statements each year. So
And the accountants have approved this.
Yes, we
correct?
discussed this concept with with our auditors last year and let them know that this was our intent, and it's gonna kind of make their lives a little easier too, because again, at the end of the statement, they have to kind of unwind it to these various funds. So if all the assets and all the liabilities are with one fund, it simplifies the bookkeeping as well as just the clarity. Even the way we've done it before is imperfect because
We're still 2 years behind
yeah, we're a little bit behind. We're a little bit behind, not behind, but just the data is behind.
the data.
And then your next statement was you saw a gap between the end of the year and the beginning of the year, or is that if projected on just this one sheet? Yeah, I think the challenge probably is if you look at the grand total at the very bottom, you see $28 million at the beginning and $23 million at the end. But you have to go back and add in the cash reserves. So that's $6.6 million, and there's a reserve for all of the funds. That is not included in that ending balance, but when we start over again on July 1st, those will be added together.
Thank you.
I think that's what you were referring to. All right, so the property tax forecast, that's on page 14. You can see that there's a growth that the county's predicting. We took this forecast from the county. It increases, it's proposed or it's recommended to increase about 4.1%. Historically, as the years gone by, that we get about 3 updates a year from the county with estimates, and usually it goes up a little bit throughout the course of the year. So I'd still say it's a conservative estimate. The internal property tax split is the same as last year and for several prior years. When I say internal, between fire, streetlights, parks and recreation, that percentage is listed the same way as it has been over the past several years. On page 16, I'm sorry, page 15 simply just shows the cost allocation. Again, this has remained the same for about a decade. So the only thing that's changed is when we combine parks, recreation, solid waste, we combine those allocations so that in total what parks and recreation and solid waste was previously. Page 16 shows historical data just with connections and population and fire calls, just some items of general interest. Again, calculations is included here on page 17, and that's required. Part of your action on the 21st will be to accept this calculation for reporting purposes. The engineering costs is not appropriated. In other words, it's not new, it's not additional expenses because these costs are actually buried in some other funds, but for the sake of seeing what it costs to support this activity and what kind of revenue it brings in, this is put together the pages 18 and 19. And again, just stop me at any time if you want to go through these in any more detail. Not shown up in a single line item, but this budget does include funding for activating or adding to our employee benefits program, a program called an employee assistance program, or an EAP. It's a commonly provided benefit that we historically have not provided. I reviewed this with our finance and administration committee last month. It has a cost of, I believe, $2.35 per month per participant. And it's not likely to be seen as particularly valuable to the employees. So I wouldn't consider it necessarily like a significant enhancement. Moreover, or more likely, it's a tool that a supervisor can use when dealing with employees who have issues. It's a resource to send them to, and that has been something that we would have used in the past had it been available. If the board wants to keep this in the mix, it will require some subsequent actions, a formal application to SDRMA and some formal board actions that would take place during the course of the year. It's not as quick as just flipping a switch. Additionally, uniform supplies uniforms are proposed to change a little bit as a part of this budget. You'll see it in a number of places, but generally in water, wastewater, and parks and recreation, we're proposing, and again, this is an item that went to the Finance and Administration Committee a month ago. we're proposing to alter our current program, which provides a $250 uniform and boot allowance to field employees, to a $200 boot allowance and a uniform service. And the service would provide it would provide uniforms for employees. They would be collected at the work site for laundering and for they'd be brought back. And so there's some advantages to this is employees, particularly the ones who maybe have contact with wastewater, they don't have to worry about bringing like that wastewater home and laundering clothes at home. And I think it'll assist with our professionalism and our experience in the field. We'll have some control about what the uniforms look like. We've, really the cost of boots for an employee is probably in the neighborhood of $150 to $200 a year anyway. So we're not leaving much, $50 or maybe $100 to buy pants and shirts. And so I've always felt a little bit lenient when it comes to uniform standards because we weren't really covering the cost of providing those uniforms historically. And so many of them got, it's not a criticism of our current crew, but historically we had these logo shirts that had it wasn't a patch, but it was a round screen printing on it, and they would become like just like a white blob because all the color had washed away and those kind of things. You could barely tell they worked for us. So these uniforms will have names and logos on them. If this is approved. So that's
So the uniform includes pants and shirt.
yes.
Okay.
Vehicle O&M costs in all funds are programmed to be higher, but I'm just pointing that when we put these estimates together, that was probably like in March. And we had just begun to see the increase in fuel costs. Well, but unfortunately that increase has been very steady since then. And so if we were to create new estimates now, it would have probably been higher. I don't think there's something to worry about today, as long as you accept that if fuel prices continue to climb or remain like above $6, we're gonna have to come and do a mid-year. We're gonna have to address this during the mid-year budget review. I don't know how long gas prices will remain this high or if they'll keep going up, but obviously it has an impact district-wide. And then electricity costs are up significantly in all funds. PG&E has a number of rate cases pending the PUC approval, and so we've assumed that those will be awarded and PG&E rates will continue to climb, and we've reflected that in our estimate of expenditures, and again that affects a number of the funds. Any questions on anything before we dive into the individual funds? Okay, so this will go well. So start on water, that starts on page 20. The actual line item detail starts on page 28. And again, I'm just gonna grab some highlights, but if there's any line items that you want to talk about in more depth, please feel free. In general, the largest source of water revenue is our user fees. This budget assumes that the rate increase that's scheduled to take effect this October will take effect, and that's one of the key reasons why you see about $100,000 more expected next year than we anticipate receiving this year. The grant funds that are associated with the Santa Lucia School connection, you recall that we partnered with Santa Lucia Schools and submitted a grant application and were awarded it to provide that connection are included here for about $77,000. And that project's included. As far as expenses, everything else is pretty similar to years past. As far as expenses, I just want to highlight a few things. You'll recall that we kind of split we had a permit and compliance specialist position. We used funding that was paying the sewer half of that, if you will, to partner with the Wallace Group to do the pre-treatment program and compliance side of things in terms of education and working with our businesses on pre-treatment or their call-off permits, as well as the FOG program. The water side is still here. We've filled that position off and on with a part-time employee. And so the funding, that half of the funding still remains. Legal services, it's kind of it's been hard to predict what those costs are gonna be, largely because most of the legal services costs in the water fund for a decade now, it's been a Steinbeck case. And when we've been actively involved in phases of trial, those costs have been higher, much higher. The last phase of trial was suspended due to illness. So it resumes in August. So I've left funding in there to get us through that next phase of trial and other Steinbeck issues. But if in fact we have multiple phases of trial this year that we have to be involved with, the judge requires even if we're not, even if we're just monitoring the case, the judge requires that during the phases of trial that we have an attorney present in the courtroom, and that's just expensive. So it's possible this is an area that we have to revisit further during the course of the year if in fact we end up with 2 or 3 phases of trial, and there are like 3 phases left. It's doubt based on my experience over the last 9 years or so with this case, it's doubtful that it'll move along that fast. One can only hope. Let's see, there's some more mapping updates programmed at $4,500. We did some more in that area this year as well. Funding for the water efficient landscape retrofit and water softener rebate programs is included at $30,000, and that item is one that I think is gaining some more traction. You know, we're kind of right in the middle of this drought messaging locally and statewide, and so don't look at that as a cap. That's not our intent, but it was enough funding to get us through the year. If in fact we were to, if there was a bustling kind of a thing, we would come back to you and request additional funding.
Is this correct that you're projecting that only $1,350 will be spent in that this year? So that's not, we didn't get many takers on that program, but I'm hopeful that that will change given the drought messaging. But am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think part of the issue was that that program came out pretty late last year, and we have a requirement for doing the lawn retrofit within a certain time frame. So we have a lot more applications that are pending now than we did in the fall.
Good.
On the again, I'm on page 29 as we go through these one-time funded kind of items, but we have included funding for the master plan, a water master plan update in this budget. It was last done, was completed about 9 years ago, started about 11 years ago. And some things have changed over that time, including a lot of our personnel and whatnot. We have interest in updating that plan. And funding is here for it, but in my view, this is it's secondary to the urban water management plan requirements. And so while the funding's here for the master plan, it's not something we would anticipate starting on immediately. We have a more pressing need on the urban water management plan, and we don't want to divide our attention too far and not get what we need out of both projects. So funding is programmed here, but likely won't all be spent this year.
I'm assuming both of those will involve RFP for a consultant services.
They will.
But you have no idea what those costs will be until we get proposed. Some guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a placeholder figure at this point, but we would obviously be involved in the award of those contracts, and we'll know if budget amendments are necessary. But the urban water management plan is something that we anticipate having to get started on sooner than later. Probably working on the RFP in the next several months and issuing it when it's, you know, when we have some certainty that we're going to hit the 3,000 connection threshold. We have 1 year from that date, as I understand it, that for this plan to be complete. We don't want to be under the gun. So it's a virtual certainty it'll be required. So we want to be prepared and getting that underway. so about $59,000 is programmed for the Santa Lucia School Connection. Some of that work has already been done. We did the riparian agency study and although we haven't done the agreement yet, but have we?
Yes, we have.
We did?
Yeah, it
Super.
was- We
Forgot.
did the study and the riparian agency agreement, and that was actually well ahead of the grant agreement, so that's probably why it's
Okay, so
far in the past.
anyway, that part of it's done, but the physical connection, the pipeline, the backflow prevention device, the on-site work to connect to our water system has not been done, has not been done yet. That's that expense. There's a replacement of a 2008 pickup is programmed to be split between water and sewer. The new truck, our 2008 pickups had some intermittent reliability problems, and so they've kind of quit using it for any long distance travel because it's abandoned us on a couple of occasions. It's proposed that the replacement vehicle would have an auxiliary fuel tank. That's something that we right now are using, kind of a portable fuel tank that we put on a flatbed truck, and then someone has to go to the gas station to get fuel out of that. And then we use that tank to fill up our generators and any equipment that's in the field, like a backhoe, or we have a other gas powered equipment generator, portable generators, et cetera. And so having a truck that has an auxiliary fuel tank built in will be an advantage, because sometimes these items are needed, like during the case of an emergency, during the extended power outage, we might have to go through the fuel runs to generators, that kind of thing. And so we want to make an improvement in that area. So the new pickup would have that. And then finally, the pre-construction activities for the Nacimiento Recharge Recovery project. That's an item that the board tackled last year, or began the process of tackling last year. Our program, we just received the nearly complete survey work that was necessary to identify the easement, and are now working with real estate appraisers to get on the calendar to get a value determined for the respective easement, so we can begin negotiating with the parties. You'll recall that we had like 3 easement alternatives. Likely the more direct crossing is going to be advantageous.
So does that $500,000 cover the cost of easement and other related costs?
Yes, and some preliminary engineering if we get that far, but we didn't want to start designing something like until we had this easement secured, because this pipeline design is obviously easement dependent, or the location of it is dependent. So the long and the short of it is ongoing revenues exceed and transfers exceed ongoing expenditures, and transfers out by about $828,000. And in this year, even with the one-time expenses, of which there are many, the fund still is healthy to the total, or to the tune of about $615,000 over expenditures, revenues over expenditures. So any questions on water before we move on to wastewater?
Okay, does it look like there's any questions?
All right.
I guess I just have a quick question. I know we need to be looking at a filtration system. Oh no, that would be the waste stuff.
Wastewater.
Okay, never mind.
I think if the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is wastewater.
So the wastewater starts on page 3738, but the line items, again, the line items are on pages 37, 38. This page 38 is the new page that was just provided. So on the wastewater fund, there are no more scheduled rate adjustments. You may recall back in 2018, they were kind of front loaded. And so even though it was a 5-year rate plan, or a 10-year financial plan, a 5-year rate plan, the rate increases all took effect in years 1, 2, and 3. So even though we have one additional water rate adjustment coming, there is not one program for wastewater. So that growth in revenue, that fairly modest one, is really just an anticipation of some new connections, a very small number of new connections. The line items are I think pretty predictable. I do want to call your attention to a couple of things under gases and chemicals. There's sufficient funding to institute the use of an aid called bioxide, which I'd like to cover in just when we get to the one-time expenses. That's an item that we took to the facilities committee just last week. So that includes that's the cost of the ongoing cost is programmed in gases and chemicals, and the one-time cost is programmed in the one-time expenditures. And maybe we'll just stop now since I've mentioned it. It's $109,000 to buy a tank and some dosing equipment and pay for its installation by the vendor for this solution. And so it's not an inexpensive item to add. What we found was the odor control unit that we installed at the West Side Lift Station 2 years ago had a effective lifespan of about half or maybe a little less of what we thought it would have. And so if that was gonna be our solution, and so it's not working very well, not working as well as it once did. We think it's still working a little bit, but we paid about $40,000 for that for a 3-year lease. And if we were to upgrade its media or replace its media, that would have a cost of, I think, about $38,000. And so the vendor's now telling us based on our current loading, current condition of the wastewater, we should expect to replace that media like annually. So we wanted to look at some other alternatives, and we brought those to the facilities committee last week, and the committee recommended we include the cost of going to this material called bioxide. It would actually be installed at a different location. It has some broader benefits. It's neutralizing the wastewater to reduce corrosion, as well as eliminating the byproducts that create that odor. So that's the goal. It is a more expensive solution. Justin can touch on the vendor and other options that we looked into if you'd like, but funding for that is included here. I just wanted to kind of warn you that we are beginning to receive more odor complaints. And even if this item is included in the budget and that budget is approved, it's some months out before the bioxide equipment can be installed in effect. So we did not anticipate replacing the media for the air scrubber for kind of a small benefit window of maybe 3 or 4 months.
Does the space, I'm assuming this is gonna go at the San Isabel lift station, the injection system, where would that be placed?
Lift station number 3.
It would be a lift station number 3. Okay, and I'm thinking this through. So there's corrosion, or the gases are offsetting in that line. Does it make sense to put that earlier in the line so that it reduces corrosion throughout the system?
Yeah, currently we have that air scrubber installed at the West Side Lift Station. So we wanted to gain a better understanding of where the problem originates and how best to effectively curb the corrosion through our system and the odors as well, which are a byproduct of those sulfides developing. And so Lift Station 3 was looked at as the right place where you're getting those sulfides to start to develop, but having the effect from that dosing location throughout to the treatment plant, so that the corrosion and the odors aren't had through the community.
And you have the space at lift station 3.
That's right.
How was it? Thanks.
Okay, so just a reminder, we on the very bottom of page 37, you'll see a couple of debt payments program. The last, it's the second and third from the bottom. Those are the 2 loans that we have associated with the East Side Force Main project, and those are continuing to be funded. Here, there's an I&I study that's recommended to be performed. This comes from our last master plan and then from some observations that we had. We still believe we've got some challenges, and we weren't that surprised we were not able to tackle over the last year. So we wanted program funding for it. Let's see, we've got some wastewater mapping items that's a kind of continue. We started that last year. There's $4,500 program for this year. We still have a line item for sludge removal. Don't yet know if that's something that's going to be, eventually it'll be needed. We're not sure if that'll be needed this year, but we've recommended that it remain included because again, it will eventually, it will be needed sooner than later. But perhaps not this year. The funding for the industrial discharge permitting inspections, and that's source control. That's the work we're doing right now with the Wallace groups. The remains included. The master plan. The last time we tackled a master plan, we combined water and wastewater together, did it as one project. That is still something that we'd like to keep in the mix. Not ready to say we'll for sure do it that way, or we're ready to recommend absolutely doing it that way, but that would be a goal. Funding for the sewer half is also included here for that master plan update. Again, same data in terms of that was last completed about 9 years ago, started about 10, 11 years ago. A lot has changed on the wastewater side in that time period. This is probably somewhat more urgent than on the water side, because we know we've got some bottlenecks in the system, and we need to start doing some planning on expanding the sewer treatment plant's total capability. So we will get to the point where we're utilizing all the treatment capacity that we have for our current customers. So this is programmed. If we continue to do it, if the plan remains doing it with the water master plan, this will be started after work is already underway on the urban water management. However, we could divide those up and tackle this one separately. Let's see. You mentioned, I think this is the filtration. Yeah, for a long time we've known that in order to reliably send our growing volume of wastewater to Selby for retrieval as a water supply, that we needed to get enhanced treatment at the wastewater plant, and adding another layer of treatment at the tail end of the plant was necessary. We're doing that now. I mean, we're running it through filters. So actually we weren't yesterday, but hopefully we're back running them through there today, tomorrow, soon, very soon. Anyways, we've got kind of a temporary system set up there that's somewhat effective, but it's not our ultimate solution. We borrowed parts and kind of built this thing to see if it would work, and it's been working, but it's not scalable, and it doesn't work ideally. So you may recall that we commissioned a study to evaluate other technologies, and that item actually went to the facilities committee last fall. I think it was about September of last year. And it was recommended that one of the more simple of the technologies is something that we could theoretically do a pilot study on. And we've worked with the vendor, and funding for that pilot study is recommended to be budgeted this year. And I think we thought the ideal time to do it might be next spring. So when our TSS levels are the highest.
I think we decided that we would come back this August and do the filtration study.
Oh, soon.
But we said last fall when we were there, and yeah, we did have some high readings in the springtime, which have resolved themselves somewhat. But we're still anticipating doing the filtration study, the pilot study in around August, late July, August was our thinking.
Okay, so pretty soon.
President Logan, Director Giardini.
Oh, thank you. Director Giardini?
Hi, I just have one question under source control dash the Wallace Group. I can agree to the amount, but I thought that I just don't know if we should use that name Wallace Group, because weren't we going to send out new RFPs to see if somebody else could do it for that price? But that might be a good budget amount to put in there for an estimate. Does it make a difference? Because we may not always have Wallace Group.
Yeah, I mean, that was just, I think, probably for internal purposes. We could strike the reference to the consultant.
That would be good. Thank you.
But if Wallace Group was stricken, I would just put source control program or something like that listed there. Okay, so we just talked about the pilot study for the sand filtration program.
Can you just go back to that for a second for the pilot study? So it's gonna get done, you said, gonna start that in
We're
August,
talking about
okay.
August, yeah, we're just reaching out to the vendor now for timing and making the cost.
Okay, all right. And then so eventually we're gonna need to get the equipment and everything going. And then that's the one that we were talked about, it was gonna end up being over $1 million.
Yeah, I think there were 3 different technologies that were studied, and they all had different operating costs and different capital costs.
Okay.
But if we prove this technology, this might be the one to go with. And then again, it might not work well and might be eliminated from the mix. That's the idea of the pilot study, is to prove that it works in our situation.
All right, but anyways, I mean, I think in all the studies that were, I mean, all the options were well over $1 million. So, and that was something that we didn't, and it needed to be done. It needs to be done quickly. It's kind of an urgent matter. At least that was my understanding from the last, from the meeting that we had.
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I mean, I think we recognize that it needs to be part of our treatment system to reliably discharge our water at Selby, but we've been able to, except for the very first year we brought the East Side Force Main online, we've essentially been able to take all of our water to Selby and percolate it. But the more volume that we have, the harder that's going to be without these additional steps. What we mentioned to the committee last, again, September, was we really thought that in the waste, if there was a growth-related urgent project before this one, it really is expanding the capacity of the force main that comes out of the west side of the station. That's
Okay,
probably the most apparent bottleneck in our system.
I see.
But these items, if we did a wastewater master plan update, we would have a recommended order of merit to come out of it. But this item, the financial modeling that we did with the rates and the impact fees included a sharing of costs, because while there's benefits right now, it's really needed as we grow, because we have now proven that we can take our current volume, treat it to a level that's acceptable to be accepted at Selby. It's just you may remember we added a spray field option, just to, sort of a plan B and those kind of things. That we need to keep that in the mix, because there can be circumstances that lead us to the point, like I think earlier this year we were kind of tapped out at Selby for a period of time. We didn't end up going to the spray field, but having that available provides a level of comfort and surety that we can continue to dispose of the wastewater.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So this tanking, the tank and dosing equipment for the bioxide, this the one-time cost of $110,000, 109 is shown here. We want to replace a couple of composite samplers. Our current ones don't hold temperature well, and so that we have less confidence in the readings that they provide. And so this will also help us with pinpointing trouble spots in the collection system for high BOD dischargers or high discharges of any sort of constituent. Reliable sampling system is important to locating those areas of concern. Again, and then there's the sort of second half of this pickup truck that I talked about a few moments ago, funded by both water and sewer. And then finally, on wastewater, before there's an item on tonight's board meeting agenda related to the Toad Creek Terrace, and I don't want to get into the specifics on that right now, but if the board does approve that item, we would be recommending making some minor changes to the wastewater budget to fund our portion of that project in next year's wastewater fund. it would be a asset replacement funded items, we'd be replacing a section of pipeline. So that would require some changes to this, well, to pages 38 and page, the same pages that we used you today. This would affect both those worksheets. And then finally, ongoing revenue exceeds ongoing expenses by about 731,000. For this year, even with all the one-time expenses, of which there are many, ongoing revenue exceeds expenses by about $230,000. In the wastewater fund. So we're
Any questions?
We're in the positive in the fund balance to the tune of $700,000. So we're 31. I'm sure is that 229
on wastewater fund.
wastewater fund.
We start out the year with about $1.6 million. We end the year with about we'll start out the following year forecast about $2 million flat. So we're going to grow about 350. If I add the cash reserve of 342,000 to the estimated ending balance of 1.66 million.
Thank you.
Okay, the next fund is the drainage fund. Pretty straightforward here. This is a very steady operation. I'll note for you, as I have for every year, that the fund operates at a slight deficit. There's still a cash balance to support it. We've been monitoring closely both the legislation and court cases that deal with how the district can alter rates charged on customers who benefit from this. And historically, like 5 years ago, and since 1998, when Prop 218, or that was I think that might have been 1996, Prop 218 passed. Storm drainage was not treated like water and sewer. So the city or the district could not raise rates without a positive vote of the ratepayers, as opposed to raising rates as long as there wasn't a majority protest. It's a pretty significant difference. And there was some state law that was enacted to alter the interpretation of that, of Prop 218. And it really just hasn't gone through any court's interpretation. We're a very small player in the drainage business. I do not recommend we be the body testing the waters in this area in terms of through a court interpretation. And so we can continue to do what we have for a few more years, but sooner or later our fund balance will get to the point where we either have to move some, about $10,000 a year of property taxes to cover the drainage fund, or we'll have to go ahead and consider raising rates. And I'd like to only consider that if there was more legal certainty that it would survive the court challenge. This is a tiny little operation, and we don't want it. It only brings in $8,000, $9,000 a year. We could, another option, I suppose, is to process a rate increase under the historic interpretation of Prop 218, which means that you actually cast a ballot to these property owners who are included in this program, and they would have to affirmatively vote for a rate adjustment. Those are unlikely to pass. So that's our issue with drainage. Again, this would change a little bit based on the board's actions tonight with regard to the pension UAL. But right now, as we stand here right now, the drainage fund is expected to end the year with about $44,000 or $46,000 once they have the cash reserve back in, about $46,000. So you can do this about 4 more years before the cash balance gets too low to support that operation.
I have a question. We can't increase the user fees by the CPI index every year. That's not allowed because it's covered, because this falls under Prop 218. Does my question make sense?
It does make sense. I don't know that I don't know that I know that for certain. I think if the district were to go through a Prop 218 hearing and incorporate a CPI adjustment, and that were to survive the whatever the rate process is, whether it's a 218 hearing that this board ultimately approves, or a 218 process where the landowner approves, if it's a part of that rate setting process, then yes, I think it could be attached. But there's still some uncertainty whether or not you can actually approve that rate adjustment without the property owners voting in favor. So most utilities have continued to treat storm drainage as though it's not like water and sewer, waiting to see if there'll be a court case, an appellate court decision that supports the state law that was. See, when the law was modified, it didn't go through the voters. So when that law, Prop 218 itself wasn't actually modified. There's actually there's other areas for concern. You know, so there was a initiatives that's out for signature right now that would further hamper Prop 218 and make some decisions like this at greater risk if it were ever passed. So I'd be reluctant, again, given how small this operation is, to do anything that was risky. It just,
Okay.
one day in court costs us more than we'd ever make in a year.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
So that's where we stand on storm drainage.
That hasn't changed. Any further questions, comments? Okay, can we move on?
Sure. So the next fund is administration. Let me know if you'd like a break or if you want to stop for a second to grab a sandwich and keep working. Otherwise, I'm afraid you're gonna conclude, you're gonna end this thing and we're gonna wrap it up and
Then we'll leave.
then you'll have to eat, I guess. Okay.
But yeah, but if you're hungry, help yourself.
So this begins on page 43, but the actual line items don't start on page 48. So again, our admin fund is really works more like an internal service fund for the various all the other funds. So the revenue sources are transfers in from other funds. You'll notice for the first time this transfer in from the CERBT, just for lack of a better word, I'll say that's our OPEB trust. So that $157,000 matches this new line item that you see down below where it says PERS health insurance retirees. So this is the PERS health insurance retirees expense is the health insurance expense for all the district's retirees, no matter what fund they last worked in. And the revenue is a reimbursement from our own trust to cover those costs, dollar for dollar. The other revenue, we used to get some rental income in pre-COVID. You know, we had a church that was here every Sunday and a handful of other groups used it. During COVID, that almost went away entirely. Over the past 6 months or so, we've had some resumption of outside users, but the key renter, if that's even the right term, the regular church that rented it every Sunday has not returned. And so this rental income is quite a bit lower because of that. It's about $5,000 a year. Sound about right? Well, it wasn't a lot, but it was more. Let's see here, the other items that I wanted to call to your attention is liability insurance. It's gone up kind of significantly, about $15,000, or about 15%, about $14,000. Anyway, that's so that has the impact that's district wide, obviously. Travel and education expenses are programmed at kind of pre-COVID levels to fund CSTA conferences and Tyler Technologies if folks are able to attend. We funded a couple of years ago and included it last year, but haven't done this cost allocation update. It was postponed because during COVID, a lot of the district's programs were had differed pretty considerably. And even earlier this year, when we examined it, we still weren't we weren't really involved in the community center at all. That use has only picked up over the past couple of months. And even then, it's really not close to what it was pre-COVID. I mean, we've had outside users, but not like it was a couple of years back. So that item is still recommended to be done. It would validate or improve on our current cost allocation methodology. A couple of other items. Last fiscal year, we bought a storage container for storing records. It's at the wastewater plant. We have that now, but there either aren't shelves or there are not very many in there. So some additional shelves so we can put boxes of records, and then there's not lighting in there, so we wanted to program some funds to drag electrical to it to add lights so that it can be used for this offsite storage. And then we programmed $9,000 to cover a 2022 board election. We have 2 seats open this November. Any questions on admin that we can attempt to answer?
Director Giardini, you still have your hand up. Thank you.
Oops, sorry.
All right, so the next one's fire. The page number of the first line item is page 56. Just a couple of things to point out to you. Measure A funds are programmed in here with a CPI adjustment and for a limited number of new parcels that were formed. Just as a reminder about Measure A, even though there is a CPI adjustment tied to it, it's capped at 2%. So it will not grow as fast as the CPI did this year, certainly, perhaps at other points in the future. I did want to call to your attention one item that changed since we brought these figures to the Finance and Administration Committee. The figure for reserve firefighters was about $5,000 or $6,000 lower when we brought it to the committee. At the time, we had discussed with you that the wages are tied to minimum wage, and there was not another programmed minimum wage adjustment. Well, like a couple of days after the committee meeting, we learned that in California, another minimum wage increase is expected to hit in January because the CPI was greater than, I believe, 7%, and so it triggered a 50-cent increase. I haven't actually reviewed the legislation myself, but it was kind of widely publicized about a month ago that this was coming. So we recalculated the reserve firefighter item, and so that's why it's a little different than it was when this item went to the committee last month. Let's see. Some one-time items that I wanted to call to your attention was we had always anticipated updating the fire development impact fee following the completion of the master plan. You'll recall when you accepted the master plan assessment work from AP Triton last year, we labeled it as an assessment, and as it didn't have some key expenses. We're now in the process of developing those. Including some key ones, some significant ones like the fire station expansion, and once those are kind of buttoned down, we'll have a nexus to generate a revised development impact fee update. So that's this $15,000 item is to provide for that calculation, that update. They'll obviously have to come back before the board before it's put in place. There's $13,000 programmed for 5 sets of turnouts, although this may be partially grant funded if we awarded the grant.
Yeah, I'd hold off until probably September, October before purchasing these to see if we're actually grant funded through the federal grant, the FEMA grant.
We would still want to program that now, just occur.
Yeah.
Correct, in case we don't get the grant. I want it in there because we are losing 10 sets that are timing out.
Okay.
couple of other items, a battery operated positive pressure fan. Is programmed at $5,000. This would replace a gas powered fan that does the same thing. But this wouldn't rely on a gas engine. So some safety enhancements there. The next phase of the training facility is budgeted at 17,000. This would add, well, I think at the time we listed it as asphalt, but probably just like road-based material and another storage container.
Road-based material, a couple storage containers, and a little bit of concrete work around the border.
$62,000 is programmed for a new fire chief response vehicle. The current vehicle would remain with the fleet and used by on-duty firefighters for travel training or running to the store to buy supplies and that kind of thing. This item was reviewed by the committee. Subsequent to the committee's meeting, there was a request to kind of revisit this a little further. And I believe Board Member Giardini wanted to see a photograph of the proposed replacement vehicle or the proposed vehicle. And so
That's the
Chief Peterson, we
closest.
kind of just described what.
Yeah, that's the closest thing I could find to probably what the vehicle would look like. The current vehicle would lose the camper shell and the lighting off the back. And that would be used primarily to, as the general manager talked about, more of a utility vehicle. For example, on the structure fire the other day, we had to load a bunch of dirty hose into the back of the engine. And then we had to load even more into the back of one of our firefighters pickup trucks, which that's their private vehicle. If we ding it, dent it, damage it, we're paying for it. So I don't like doing that. So this gives us that utility.
Does this vehicle, do they come like as a hybrid or are they all powered right now?
Oh, no, yeah, they're gas.
So not a hybrid.
The hybrids would be probably about $10,000, $20,000 more
Do you,
on these.
does it make sense over, I mean, because we keep these cars for a long time, so the amount that use it, would it make sense?
I don't know that they make
Oh, I see.
these in hybrid because they're called SSVs, special service vehicles.
Okay,
They're significantly less than your standard
I see.
Tahoe or something like that. They come with additional batteries and then they come with the wiring in them to allow you to hook up all the lights and that type of stuff.
What is the year of GMC? And are you looking to add a vehicle to the fleet for the purposes you're talking to, or just primarily replace that GMC, the command vehicle?
It's, well, so we got rid of the rescue. We put 30,000 back in the budget for that. And so this GMC is a 2008. It's going to remain in the fleet as kind of that utility.
It's an 08.
No,
Okay.
I think it's 11.
Oh, 11. You're right. It is an 11.
The reason I didn't ask for a picture, although the picture is great, thank you, Chief, was when we approved the expenditure for the last fire truck that was purchased. I think our board didn't ask for enough information to determine the differences between the different fire trucks and why that specific fire truck was needed versus the fire truck that you want to purchase now. And so I was asking for clarification on
I think some of the comments that I made were with regards to the Type 3 engine
mhm.
and the purchase of that and the different types of engines. So yeah, this is a little bit different. They're just both utility style vehicles. So
And I just want to make sure the board was clear on why we're purchasing another car, a vehicle, and are we okay with doing that? And do we have the, not deterioration, what is the word I'm thinking of? To depreciation, thank you, in the budget to be able to cover the cost of the depreciation yearly.
And that's my concern as well, is not only expense, but the depreciation. You know, my whole goal in us in fire is set aside as much money as we can for that new type 1. I mean, we weren't able to fund that this year because we were uncomfortable with the financial scenarios. And our strategy was at the board meeting, let's do everything we can to squirrel enough money away, you know, cobble along our current vehicles and use them as long as we can. At the same time, setting aside as much money as we can every year so that we can get a new type 1. Is that, I mean, that's a huge ticket item. And, you know, what I think our solution at the time was, you know, replace your transmission, do whatever you need to do, hang on to that vehicle, use it as long as you can, and then save enough money to buy a new car when you've got the money. So I just want to make sure that we aren't doing something now, or maybe there's some sacrifice in you know, some of the responses or whatever, but our primary goal is to get that type 1. So does this detract from our primary goal of getting that type 1? That's my question.
Well, I mean, I think all decisions you make have a impact to a future decision. As far as the impacts to, will this cause our asset replacement requirements to go up? Yes, it will, right? Any asset you buy is going to trigger more to be saved for its eventual replacement. So this will cost us, you know, a little bit larger asset replacement in the future years. Will you see that? I don't know, because there's a lot of assets on the books, and some might time out or be fully depreciated by the time this hits. And so I don't know if it will actually go up in cost, but on the books, it will have an impact like that during its depreciable life. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to say that there's no impact. It's obviously not $1 million decision. It's a, you know, a $60,000 decision. So order of magnitude is much smaller, but
And this was part of the reason why I got rid of the rescue, was to diminish that asset depreciation. That put $35,000 or $32,500 back into asset depreciation. So that's covering a lot of that cost.
The other, I'm sorry, it's hard.
Giardini?
Thank you. The other thing is that, I mean, I'm for this vehicle. The thing is that our estimate came in on the fire station at 5.1 plus adding some soft costs. So we're 5.1 million plus, and a new fire truck is, you know, close to 900,000 or a little over. So we're looking at a $6 million deficit. Squirreling away the $62,000 isn't going to make a dent in that, or spending the $62,000 on this new vehicle isn't going to make a dent in that. Our board needs to look at alternative ways to get more money to the fire department, because the few $1,000s that we're, you know, spending in the asset replacement, you know, isn't going to help us get the two other things that the fire chief needs and his department needs. And, you know, so yes, it's an expense and it's going to take it out of the depreciation. But when you look at the big picture of almost 6 million is what we need, then, you know, that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you. So that fire truck right now that you're using is 10 years old, correct?
Correct.
And what's the mileage on that vehicle?
11 years old. It's about 68,000 on it right now.
68,000?
Correct.
Are there issues with the car?
Yes.
Okay. And what are those issues?
Transmission, it's doing what's, I can only describe as not going into gear.
Here?
It's delayed me up to 5 minutes on a particular call one time. It's intermittent. It's been into the Chevy dealership. They can't figure it out. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't.
So there are repair issues with the vehicle right now.
Correct. So taking it from my initial response vehicle to a utility vehicle would lessen that impact of somebody being delayed by a mechanical issue.
I'm in favor of keeping it in the budget. I don't know how other board members are feeling.
I mean, I feel like, you know, we've got a full-time fire chief, and with that goes, you know, goes along some expenses, and this is one of them. I mean, we gotta make sure our fire chief is able to get around when he needs to.
Is anyone opposed to this particular line item?
I am. I think that our whole focus should be on getting that one, and so I'm the lone vote not to fund this. But I certainly see the utility of doing this, but you know, I'd love to see a strategy where we just, you know, save as much as we can and set aside as much as we can for that class one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for that, and I'm actually, you know, I talked to general manager about that, and that's very important, but at this, you know, I mean, to me, at the same time, having, you know, the fire chief needs to be at a call, and, you know, I've seen him in action. I mean, you need him there, so he is able to, you know, organize the scene and make sure everything goes okay. So, and you've already mentioned that you have saved almost half of that cost by, you know, so I mean, so we're now talking down to, you know, $30,000. So I think it's important to give our chief what he needs in this situation.
Director Peterson, do you have
Yeah,
some
I'm in
thoughts?
favor of the expenditure, but I guess I gotta question the fact that I've got a 2008 car with truck, and it's got over 100,000 miles on it, and it runs fine. I don't understand. Yours is 2011, and it's only got 68,000. It doesn't seem like you've got a whole lot of usage out of that truck. What is it, by the way?
GMC.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
So essentially, you got to remember, fire vehicles are kind of like police cars. Your typical police car is only going to last about 5 years because they are stop and go, stop and go. You start them, you immediately throw them into gear and go. On a code 3 response, you've got heavy braking, heavy acceleration. So it's not like normal driving. This is a standard pickup truck when it was purchased. These SSVs, they're heavier duty brakes, they're heavier duty transmissions, all the things that are built into what is called a special service vehicle. It's not a PPV, a police pursuit vehicle, but they're similar in nature. So I think that's why that thing has gotten some abuse and is having some issues. It's not designed for this type of work.
Any other comments or questions? So it sounds like we have the majority of the board who is willing to support this replacement, with the exception of Director English. So I think we'll just leave it in at this point in time. But I don't disagree with Director English's comments about, you know, we do need to find ways to fund that type 1 replacement engine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, okay. All right.
Okay, oh yeah, I didn't know I have a few other items on fire. So the last year, the fire fund had an expected surplus, you know, revenue over expenditures of about 92,000. And at the time, the committee had recommended creating a new line item for future, I'll call it future fire operations. Just to remind you, recall that when we did all the analysis for Measure A, we knew that that it would bring in, the expenses would go up in the out years, and so we needed to set aside some money early on. So that we could afford the operations in the out years. We set aside that $92,000. This year, when this went to the committee, there was actually an anticipated revenue over expenses of about $70,000. That the committee recommended that we bring to the board, splitting that excess, I don't want to call it excess or surplus, but sharing that between putting up half of the additional amount in the asset replacement fund and half into the future fire operations as a way of helping to surcharge that asset replacement account, knowing that that's our real hiccup with regard to replacing the Type 1 engine. Now, those numbers changed a little bit. As I mentioned, we had to make some revisions to the reserve line item. So the numbers the committee looked at were a little bit bigger than what you're looking at now. We kept that same principle in this document. So about $32,500 in additional asset replacement. If this budget were approved as it stands, we're going to asset replacement. So 110 versus like 78,000. I can't remember what the exact number was at the time. Or that the depreciation schedule would call for. And then this budget would also take that remaining $32,500 after that additional asset replacement contribution is made and place it into the same sort of set aside account that future fire operations. Now, I don't want to belabor this point too much because quite honestly, you have total control over both of those line items, right? They're not externally regulated. They're just a placeholder for you. You could use your asset replacement money to do something not related to asset replacement and just be violating your own policy. So it's not like an outside entity would regulate that. Nonetheless, that's what this would accomplish. So it's a little unique in that about if the budget is approved as drafted, about $32,000 in additional funds would go into asset replacement, and the remaining $32,500 or so would go into the future fire operation line item. So that's fire, and that's what it does. You can't see that future fire operations on this page. You have to go back to the summary of fund balance page to see that, but it's on page 9. See coming out of you can see the transfer into future fire operations on that sheet.
So according to the model that we had, we were supposed to save 51,000 this year.
Yeah, the model had predicted that we would be bringing in about $51,500 more than we had spent, and this budget would essentially bring in about 65,000 more than we spent. And even that's missing something because we haven't incorporated fully the CFD funds yet. If we had, the number would be another 20 grand or so higher.
Yeah, as we discussed before, unfortunately, we didn't have the asset replacements in this model, so I guess. All right. So we're close, but not too bad.
And last year we did a
You did more.
additional, yeah.
So we're good? Okay. The next fund is the Community Facilities District. So just real quickly, this page 61, if you want to look at it, we do anticipate a growth of about $14,000 in CFD taxes. That's due to newly developed parcels over the past year and some growth to the CPI. You'll recall that fund had those annual assessments have a 2% floor and a 6% cap. So that will be able to take more advantage of the high CPI that we're dealing with today. And formal action on that will take place in July by the board in terms of the assessments for next fiscal year. We do program in the professional services associated with supporting this. We have a tax consultant and then a little bit of legal help. We've ran into that in the past where we needed to spend some money on the legal side. You might recall last fall, I believe it was, we dealt with people self-help housing and some challenges that we were dealing with at the time. So we want to have a line item to cover those potential costs. The committee reviewed this as well, and and recommended that while we have now a fund balance in this, you know, some 50, we're expecting to have some, well, I guess I'll go back to page 9. The end of the year, we expect to have $58,000. They weren't prepared to recommend a split of those proceeds. So it remains with this fund, but down the road, you can see that you would be able to take funds out of the CFD and transfer to other areas of other operational areas within the district.
There is some limitations on how we can use those funds, is that correct?
Yeah, but not the CFD was formed fairly broadly. I mean, the intent all along has been in Parks and Recreation and Fire, but it includes a number of services. So
It's getting there, it's starting to build. So
Yeah.
we knew it would be a long road, but let's start somewhere.
Okay, so the next one is streetlights. I'll just page 65. This is you know, this essentially covers the costs. There happens to be this year an $810 deficit. I don't think that's a predictor that that it will have shortfalls going forward. That deficit is because we did anticipate some electricity cost increases. We didn't really analyze we're charged the streetlights that we pay for have a different rate than just you don't pay for the power that you use, you pay a fixed rate for streetlights. And so we haven't analyzed the rate increase to streetlights, and we probably have more than enough money in here to cover what the rate will ultimately be set at. So so that I'm not concerned about the $810 deficit. But if we get to a pattern where we're running a deficit each year, we'd have to come back and look at some options.
Questions?
All right.
Park and Rec.
Next year, we gotta put Melissa first.
17 years they've been saying that.
We always say the best for last.
There you go. So I'd jump to page 73. That's where the line items start. And then just real quickly, all of our traditionally offered programs are expected to occur next fiscal year on the normal schedule. We haven't, last year we were still kind of off. You might remember, like our Concerts to the Park program was shifted about 4 weeks backwards. This year, everything is planned pretty much on the same schedule that it had historically been offered. For example, Concerts to the Park start next Wednesday. And all of the traditionally offered youth sports, youth soccer, basketball, softball, flag football, all in our historically offered non-youth sports activities like Concerts to the Park and Live in the Dream are also programmed here. And what we found was, while there were some ups and downs during COVID, over the past year, we already really returned to our pre-pandemic enrollment levels. So our participant levels are more or less returned. The only sport that we had some real challenges with in terms of a difference from normal last year was youth basketball, because we ran it outside instead of inside. But our goal is to run an indoor program this year. Time will tell whether that's going to be possible based on any COVID restrictions at the time. Right now, if it was December today, we'd be doing it indoors. Let's see, we've got the recycling grant program remains funded. Just a few items for Park and Rec that I wanted to call out. One is a point of sale computer for recreation. This is something that we've wanted for some time. Still our arrangement through Tyler and through the vendor, the credit card vendor, still isn't 100% ideal. Our TPAR, or Tyler Parks and Recreation module, isn't operating like it was intended to. Nonetheless, we need to get rid of this practice of accepting credit card payments on a notepad and then bringing it here 2, 3, 4 days later to enter it into the system. And so, and that's how we're dealing with it now, and have been for many years. So that would eliminate that activity. There is $3,000 programmed in the budget for window coverings at the community center. We had them, but you might recall that when COVID first hit, we knew that room was due for a paint job, so we all of a sudden had nobody in there. So we we pulled them down and we painted everything, and it looks a lot better, but they were kind of beat up and we didn't put them back up. And now that we've got some folks using the room, they want them back in. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but there is a demand for at least having blinds or something to be able to cut out the glare of headlights coming in. So that's the $3,000. $2,000 is programmed for a portable PA system. Ours is just out of date and works intermittently because of some radio frequency issue. And $5,500 for replacement copy machine and printer. Same kind of issue, out of date, not compatible with the new cloud-based computer we're using. It's just served its purpose. And overall, with those expenses, we do have this year revenue expenses of about $90,500 expected. So still a surplus in Parks and Recreation. Again, I know this is a fun couple challenges with annually. You know, that surplus is really due to a couple of factors, maybe 3 key factors. One, we combined it with solid waste. We knew the solid waste fund had a surplus annually. 2, we've stopped paying into OPEB, so that's created a savings district-wide, all funds-wide. And then 3, now the funds are not responsible for paying for their own retiree healthcare. So that's why this was maybe a lot quicker than what it has been before, because we've paid into OPEB for several years. That was difficult, and now we're beginning to reap the benefits of that investment.
Questions, comments?
Oh, I just have like a comment. First of all, it's great to see things back to normal again. I know it was challenging, so thank you for hanging, Melissa. Thank you for hanging in there with us and working with us. So I'm glad to see everything's working. Another thing is, I'm glad to see that we have the $90,000 and the additional revenue over expense. Just as a reminder to the board, the park renovation ran into some challenges because of the compliance that we have to have for ADA with the sidewalk, and now the whole road, it's getting narrower and things like that. So that's something that they're looking at right now in terms of what it takes to get everything fixed, but it's going to take additional money that we hadn't thought about before. It's probably at least 130, but probably going to be more than that, if depending on what we want to do in terms of widening the road and things like that. So that would be something that we probably have to keep in mind as we go forward, looking at maybe using some of this money for that, because otherwise we won't have the money to do the project. It's because it was tight to begin with. So, but just a comment on that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, I would encourage us to look at the CDBG grant funds. We've never been in a place where we had a project and we had some estimates or some good information. That's a fund I think that we may qualify well for this year. And especially since we put off the project, that we may be competitive there, and that may help with some of that gap. And I agree, there's another situation where we're gonna need to be setting money aside through savings and other ways to pay for that park improvements. And hopefully with some fundraising. So anyway, and then I just had a question. I see we're spending $10,000 in the grant program, the recycling grant program. Great. So we actually had somebody come forward and apply for and secure grant funds from that program.
Yeah, 2 people. For the past fiscal year was the market, which for a time replaced all of the styrofoam with those blue Pepsi cups, if you remember.
Okay.
And also the Vineyard Dog Park for some of the muck mitts and recycled dog chips. So
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right. Director Giardini, do you have any comments or questions?
Just that I like Director English's comment about looking into the CBDG funds. That would be a good option. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't have any comments, Director Peterson.
Just
So,
like to thank Melissa and Jeff and everybody over there for their hard work. I know it's a pain. It seems like it gets done and then where you know it's time to do it all over again. Been there, done that for many years, so I appreciate you guys for all the effort you put in, especially you, Natalie.
Yeah, this is Natalie's
Yeah.
handiwork here, so.
I just want to thank, and I'm appreciative of the staff and general manager for being fiscally responsible and being able to bring a budget to us that's, it's easy to, to approve a budget or, at this. I know several years ago, it wasn't the case. There were a lot of problems. So I really appreciate everyone's sacrifices and being disciplined and being fiscally responsible to get our town budget in a way that's, I'm proud to present it. If people come and ask us, we can say we're financially in great shape. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Make our job a lot easier.
Great, I'm not sure.
well, it is nice to see Park and Rec finally in a position where we're not in the negative. And I know, I would just like to echo, the sentiment is, I know this is a thorn in a lot of people's side, hearing the budget, having this meeting. And actually, I think my time on the board, this has actually been the smoothest budget review. So thank you all.
There's some policies that the board set up to allow us to this.
Yeah.
Not that we want to pat ourselves on the back, but the board did some heavy lifting a while back.
It must have been before my time.
I'd like to add to my previous comments and really thank Melissa, because Melissa, I think the last 2 years during COVID really stood up and took a lot on her shoulders that most of us don't realize, especially those that aren't on staff. She did a yeoman's job. It didn't go unlooked, or should we say overlooked? Unnoticed. There you go. That's what happens when you get old. Find those words.
So thank you all. And with that, I think we've got 5:30. We've got food over there, so we'll wait for dinner. So, Director Giardini, do you want to just call back in at 7?
Sounds like a good plan.
Sorry. So just what we're proposing tonight on the pension UAL is not shown in this budget. If the board approves the pension pay down, we'll have to revise it'll be a budget amendment for the current fiscal year. Next year's payments are programmed in here, whether you do it tonight or not.
But it'll affect this year's budget, not the next year.
Yes.
Okay, won't affect that document. That's all I need.
It affects the document, but not next year's line item.
Sure.
Okay, we're ready to adjourn. So we'll adjourn.